What is it, John?
What is our fourth and final main topic today?
Main topic number 4 comes to us from Kyle Robinson, who says, hear ye, John and crew. As of this message, I came across the Deadline report that Papa Bob Iger is back, baby. Papa Iger is reinstated as CEO effective immediately after Bob Chapek re-upped his contract. This is all spectacular news. My question is, when will we see the effects of the change in leadership with the movies, shows, streaming, and the parks? What do you think will be the priorities he has set based off of his previous work? Thanks, and I got my pen and paper for the Campea classroom.
Kyle, thanks for saying that in. And yes, indeed. Yes, sir. Oh, my God. Big Papa Iger is back. The adult is back in the room and in charge of things. Thank heavens. Now, listen, before we dive into the whole thing, I do want to say something, in defense of Bob Chapek. And I do.
Really?
I honestly do.
All right.
That guy could rock a beard. I mean, that dude could rock a beard. I also want to say, listen, I have never, we talked about this on the show a few weeks ago. I've never personally disliked Bob Chapek. For all, I've never met the gentleman, or I might have, if I did once, it was very briefly. But for all I know, he was a totally nice, wonderful, kind, good man, good father, good son, good sibling, all that kind of stuff in real personal life. For all I know, he could be the nicest guy in the world. I don't have a single disparaging thing to say about the gentleman as far as him personally. Also, I want us all to remember, and we brought this up every time we talked about Chapek, but it needs to be said. We have to keep in mind that he took over Disney under the absolute worst case scenario possible situation that anybody could take over a company. He took over Disney when no movie theaters were open, nothing could be in production, Disney cruises were shut down, Disney parks were shut down. I mean, it was a company that was completely paralyzed due to the pandemic and was hemorrhaging money and losing money. And that, I don't think any of us should ever forget that was the circumstances under which Bob Chapek took over Disney. A Herculean task under the best of circumstances, let alone under the worst. I've also was somebody who said that I liked the hiring of Bob Chapek when it happened. On paper, I thought it was a good hiring. That being said, the tenure of Bob Chapek as CEO has been disastrous. It was simply something that was not going to work from the beginning. And unfortunately, in his 2 3/4 years as the CEO of Disney, because I believe he took over in February of 2020, so we're just about 2.5 months away from the 3-year anniversary. And it's funny because I always said, got to give him about 3 years. I always said, like, no matter how bad things were, I always said, you got to give him about 3 years. And we're almost at 3 years now.
A month before the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
A month before the pandemic hit. He could not have seen that happening.
Nope. I mean, none of that was his fault. That being said, his entire 2 3/4 years has been marred by things that were under his control. And it became very obvious very quickly that this was going to be disastrous. Let's go through. Now, this is not necessarily in chronological order, but these are the headlines that kind of plagued the tenure of Bob Chapek. First of all, and this is where I jumped off the Bob Chapek boat immediately, was the infamous reorganization, which caught Bob Iger completely by surprise. Because Bob Iger commented on this. What Bob Chapek did was he instituted several brand new layers of middle management. He created new positions for his banker buddies. He created positions that gave people the authority to make the decision what content the various studios made and where that content would go. And I remember saying at the time, guys, you don't understand. What this means is Kathleen Kennedy is not going to be able to decide where her Star Wars projects are going to go. Kevin Feige no longer has the decision-making ability to decide where the Marvel projects go. And everybody said, oh, John, of course he will. He's Kevin Feige. He didn't. They took that away from him. They took that ability and that power away from him. Suddenly you had bankers that were making overall creative decisions, power that used to be in the hands of creators and creative people, and were now put into the hands of business people, which was the total antithesis of what Bob Iger believed in.
Well, also, to be fair, though, Chapek didn't work with creative people. He came
didn't
out of
know
that.
how to work with creative
No, and
people.
he came out of the parks. And the parks were very much about bankers and how all of that was
and
going
home
to work.
entertainment, but it was always after the fact that the home entertainment became a product.
Yeah, yes.
So you had none of
He
that.
was
So-
well liked in home entertainment, I have to say.
Yeah, but we heard about that. Not so much in parks, but in home
No.
entertainment, right? So the one thing was the reorganization. Well, then we can't ignore this. There was the thing that shocked the entire industry when well-respected executive chief of general entertainment content at Disney, unceremoniously, Bob Chapek fired him out of nowhere, Peter Rice, which everybody in Disney and outside of Disney was like, what the hell you doing, Bob?
He threatened his power.
He did. He was a threat to his power. He was seen, everybody knew inside the company that Peter Rice, as one of the top executives of Disney, was also angling, had his eyes on the top CEO job as well. The speculation, and of course it's speculation, Bob Chapek has never come out and said this himself, but the general assumption here was that there was no practical reason to let this guy go. He was good at his job. The company loved him. The industry well respected him. He saw him as a threat and decided to get rid of him. That was the next big thing I was saying. Also, let's not forget about the whole Scarlett Johansson situation. Right? Remember that? Scarlett Johansson had to sue Disney because Bob Chapek and Disney decided to renege on their deal with her when it came to Black Widow. That her deal specifically called for, she accepted the paycheck she got because they had built into her contract certain points and back ends on the box office release. And then when they, without consulting them, without giving them a word, decided to put Black Widow on Disney Plus streaming without going to her first and saying, hey, just so you know, this is what we're looking at doing because the pandemic and everything. Let's work out some financial arrangement. They did none of that. They dropped it out of nowhere and they told her, suck it up and deal with it. And then when Scarlett Johansson had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to say, no, you owe me. We had a deal. We had a contract and you violated the contract. You know what they did? Under Bob Iger, I'll tell you exactly what they would have done. First of all, under Bob Iger, this never would have happened in the first place. But if it did get to that point, Bob Iger would have said, Scarlett, you take your two best, most trusted advisors. Me, I'll bring along my right-hand man or woman. Let's get together. Let's go to St. Louis, grab some ribs. Let's sit down. Let's hammer this out. Let's get this done right. But that's not what Bob Chapek's Disney did. Bob Chapek's Disney, this brain lightning was, let's create a bash Scarlett Johansson campaign. And their PR people started to put out these nasty attacks on Scarlett Johansson saying, she's rich. She shouldn't care if we give her
During
more
a
money.
pandemic.
During the pandemic. Can you believe Scarlett Johansson wants to get what she is owed? Can you believe that? It was one of the dumbest decisions ever. It embarrassed the company. It embarrassed Bob Iger, who at the time was still chairman of the board of Disney. It embarrassed everybody. And eventually, you know what happened? Exactly what I said would happen day one. This is going to only end one way, I said, with Disney writing a big fat check. Because they did, and they did. That's how it ended. Disney had to write her a big fat check. So that was another thing under Chapek.
Which, by the way, she had earned and was owed.
Earned and was owed. And it's just not what you deserve. It's what you negotiate.
Yes, sir.
And what she negotiated was in the contract. Then, of course, another big thing, and we're not going to get into politics here, but it's important to say that a lot of the employees at Disney were very turned off when they found out about Disney's involvement in Florida and what they did and did not do in Florida. Again, we're not going to get into the merits or the lack of merits of that, but it was just another thing where the Disney employees were got really upset with Bob Chapek. Remember, this is all within 2 3/4 years. Under 3 years, all this happened. There's more. Then we had the big overreaction that happened. The massive overreaction where as soon as they hit some adversity, we talked about this just the other day, where all of a sudden Bob Chapek said, oh dear, okay, we're going to cut back on our marketing. We're going to cut back on our content, which is our money cow. And we're going to cut back on that. And no more free lunches. Executives can't travel to meetings. Everybody don't go to meetings, to meet over face. Like things that little piss-sized companies like mine would do. And I think that looked kind of embarrassing to a lot of the executives at Disney. Then, of course, we move on to the fact that their stock started to fall. Despite the fact that they were adding subscribers to Disney Plus and things like that, the overall accumulation of all the stuff that had been going on in the company all started to rake up, and profits were falling. It wasn't profits, it was losses. They were losing money out of him, and that's why Jim Cramer got online. We talked to, he was a big financial analyst, said Bob Chapek needs to go and all that kind of stuff. Then, of course, don't forget this. Under the category of pissing off their own employees, this has not gone away. I talked to somebody recently who said the fire is just as hot as it ever was. A lot of people at Pixar resented Bob Chapek and the leadership at Disney for the fact that they took a number of their projects, turning red, not the least of
Especially
which,
that movie.
especially this movie, which is a magnificent film. And Pixar was absolutely, and the people at Pixar were absolutely ready for mutiny over the fact that talks about Max Exodus and stuff like that. So as we start to go through, in just 3 years, we look at where there was the idiotic organizational changes, the getting rid, some Game of Thrones level shit, getting rid of anybody who could have been possible competition, the way he managed or did not manage the Scarlett Johansson situation, the Florida situation, the dropping in the stocks, the slumping of years, how we reacted to the diversity, a mutiny rising up over there. And I'll tell you what else. There's more. There is more. Now, before we get to any of that, this is what the folks over at the Hollywood Reporter had to say about this whole situation. They wrote the following. In a stunning turn of events, the Wall Street Disney Company says that the Walt Disney Company, I should say, that Bob Chapek will step down as CEO, with Bob Iger returning to lead the company. While Iger will be returning to his old role, the board also made it clear that his new term will be a temporary one. Iger has agreed to serve as Disney's CEO for 2 years, with a mandate from the board to set the strategic direction for the renewed growth and to work closely with the board in developing a successor to lead the company at the completion of his term, the board said. Okay, so Bob Iger right now has 2 jobs, and they're monumental. And I'm not 100% sure 2 years is enough to do it, but it might be. Job number 1, reset us. Reset our direction. Get us back on the right path. I mean, bring up the quote again there, Jonathan, if you don't mind. But again, it looks as he has agreed to serve as the CEO. His main thing is to set the strategic direction, because that, in other words, is saying we have been rudderless. We have been going in the wrong direction this whole time. And that's what we think. The other thing is 2 years to identify and ready a successor to take over. Now, the Bob Chapek one did not work out. I would go so far as to say that Bob Chapek's selection as the successor to Bob Iger might be the biggest failure of Bob Iger's illustrious career. And you got to go back to the drawing board. They learn from their mistakes, go back. Now let's identify the right person, and then let's give them a real good long amount of time to be under your tutelage of how to get that. But first, set the direction, and then bring in somebody who, unlike Bob Chapek, immediately stepped in and said, yeah, what Iger was doing was dumb. Iger doesn't know what he's doing. Let's completely change everything that Iger set up. No. Mr. Iger, the board said to Bob Iger, come in, set us on the right path, and then bring in somebody who's actually going to execute that path you set us on. Because we need to get back to the days of success after success. And listen, the challenge is not small. I can't even say, I think Big Papa Iger's the best executive in entertainment history, but there's nothing to say he's going to be able to do it in 2 years. So it may or may not work. But I want to point out one other big thing here. Something else happened that we are not being told.
Oh.
I 100% guarantee you that something else happened that we are not being told.
John, let me ask you this. How much money do you think they shelled out to Bob Iger? And remember, they have to pay off Chapek's contract.
A contract which was just renewed for another 3 years. Listen, I never like to hear about somebody losing their job, but shed no tears for Bobby Chapek, because he's going to sleep just fine tonight with his hundreds of millions of dollars. He'll be okay.
Yeah, but this was, I think people have to understand, this was an incredibly expensive transition.
That's how important it was that they get rid of him, despite the fact that the price tag this is going to carry. And there hasn't even been any notification about.
I don't think there
how much
ever
they're
will
gonna
be,
pay
but
Iger.
I guess they're going to have to at some point because of shareholders.
It's a publicly traded company.
Yeah, they have to know.
But here's the thing. They just renewed, which we were not surprised about. We said he was going to get the renewal. I said he's going to get the renewal, but he's not going to last to the end of the renewal. I didn't think it would be this soon. But I said he's not going to make it to the end of the renewal. But here's the thing. They just renewed him. For them to go just, what is it, a month and a half ago?
Yeah,
A couple
about
months
that.
ago, from, just renewing him to 3 years to making a move of ousting him now, that tells me the final straw hit. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I have seen no evidence of. Let me make that very clear. So listen, I know some other outlets, when I say some stuff about some things I speculate or I hear this, all of a sudden other outlets run with it as headlines. Let me be very, very cautious to everybody. Do not run this as a headline. I am telling you something that I have heard, but I don't know that I have a lot of faith in it, and I have no evidence to back it up. But in the initial Hollywood Reporter story, they mentioned an emergency meeting of the board. And then all of a sudden, Bob Chapek is no longer CEO. What I have heard, and again, I have nothing to back this up with, so I'm not even sure I believe this entirely, but it does line up with what we've heard. I have heard that the head of Disney Studio, that's not the overall Disney, but the actual live action movie production arm of Disney, the company that would make the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, for example. I heard that the main guy over Disney Motion Pictures, the main head over Pixar, and Kevin Feige collectively went and talked to some board members to express dissatisfaction. Now, whether that meant ultimatums of he goes or we go, and I don't know if any of that's true. I don't know if that's true. But whether it's that, if it's not that, it's something else that would be equally seismic. Because this company, it is not good for your stock to do CEO shakeups. Even if you're bringing in the greatest of all time, Bob Iger, it is not good for your stocks to do big, massive shakeup. It shows instability, it shows chaos, and those are things that the market doesn't like. So it had to be something so seismic that they had to say, listen, we can't do this anymore. Guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of this video, DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, should be your go-to when betting on the NFL this holiday season. With things like same-game parlays, easy and fast payouts, player props, and more. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. And check this out. Right now, everyone can earn up to a 100% boost with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. Just go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app, place a same-game parlay, and combine multiple bets like which team will win, player props, total points, and more. The more legs you add, the bigger the boost, the bigger your shot to win big. Personally, I like the Rams to pull off a big upset win over the Chiefs next weekend. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code Campea. Place a $5 bet on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with the code Campea. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
Well, I think you're right, because, last week, it's funny, I listened to a lot of NPR driving to and from the studio, and there's a lot, there's a show in the afternoons about money. And they were talking about, they had a guy on talking about the fact that $4 billion lost in streaming. And there's all these cutbacks in terms of, we got to cut back content. Well, according to you, what you said, the emergency meeting, these are all content providers. And these content providers, they're the backbone of everything they make, everything that Pixar makes, that Marvel makes, that live action Disney makes, including Lucasfilm, all of that filters down to the rest of their business, their theme park business, their cruise business, these things, merchandising and streaming. It is the DNA of the company is what these people are making, and they're being hampered. So they're like, if we can't do what we're here to do, if there's a problem, the rest of the company, and that's why when you say the three of those people got together, I believe something like that happened, because the reason that the company's streaming fortunes are down is not because of the content. It's the expectations that they're placing on things. There's only so many houses that people can put Disney Plus into. There has been, I think, the expectation has been set in the wrong direction. And if you look at where Chapek is a corporate animal, whereas Bob Iger came from outside that. He worked his way up in other different businesses. Bob Chapek has been at Disney. He's a lifer. You know, he was a guy that came up with that corporate structure. So what do you do in a corporation? Yeah, let's bring in more bankers. That's his world. So what he didn't have is dealing with creative people. And yet Disney's bread and butter, their DNA is because of creative people. And if you're not servicing those people and you're focusing more
And
on
by the way,
corporate-
that's not just in the movie world as well. It's the creative people who run their cruises, the creative people who drive their theme parks. Creatives are important across the entire Disney.
well, you know what they wanted to do? Another thing, they wanted to take all the Disney Imagineers and move them to Florida.
Yeah.
Over the last 2 years. And people were like, wait, what? You know, and all these people that imagine the Disney Imagineers were based here. I mean, yeah, they go to other places too, but they wanted to move the kit and caboodle. How do you think that went over with Disney Imagineers who have homes and families and everybody's here in Southern California? Not well. So that was another thing that we don't hear about because it's not as sexy, but it still happened. So anyway, I totally believe what you're saying about this emergency meeting. I don't have any reason. I don't know anybody no one's told me that. I don't know, but I could totally see that happening because they're fed up.
Now, another question that's come up on this, actually, Harloff was recording his show earlier today, and out of nowhere, without giving me a heads up, he just called me in the middle of his show. So, and one of the things that Harloff asked me was, you know, a lot of people, John, are saying that this means Kathleen Kennedy is going to be out now too, right? Because, you know, she hasn't made, you can't have this Star Wars franchise, like you've pointed this out many times, and not put out movies. Where are the movies? And one of the things I said, well, here's the thing you got to keep in mind. I have heard, and again, I don't have anything to back this up with, but other people have heard this too. I'm not the only one. Other people have heard this as well, that the lack of movies coming out of Star Wars was actually a Chapek directive.
Yeah.
That Chapek directed that there weren't going to be any movies coming out right now. But on top of that, if anything, the return of Bob Iger kind of solidifies Kathleen Kennedy because Iger is a Kennedy ally. And now I still don't believe that. I believe her current deal takes her to 2025. I personally don't believe Kathleen Kennedy makes it to that or past it, I should say. But I don't think she's going to go anywhere immediately. If anything, I think Iger is going to want to, in the midst of all the chaos and the shakeup, Iger's going to want to steady things pretty quickly. And the last thing that I think Iger wants to do now is start replacing these studio heads as well. So I think that's going to be a difficult thing.
Well, and Lucasfilm right now is in a pretty stable place. You've got Willow that's about to start.
Which looks better than I thought it would.
And people are saying it's good. You've got Indiana Jones on the horizon, which is a big, that's one of Disney's big tentpole movies in 2023. You've got Andor burning up, maybe not viewership, but getting critical accolades. You've got Mandalorian season 3 in the wings, which people can't wait for. I'm sure it's going to be great with the retaking of Mandalore or
people
whatever.
People are excited about Ahsoka.
Yeah, so
Dawson.
There's nothing in, like, we're sort of past Rise of Skywalker and Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan are in the rearview mirror, but all of those were good. They were good bets at first on paper. It wasn't like that was a stupid thing to do.
And let's face it, too, as much as I didn't like Obi-Wan or Book of Boba Fett, they did get viewership.
Yeah, they got
strong viewership.
So Lucasfilm is in. Look, this whole thing, people haven't understood how business works. You know, Kathleen Kennedy, if you look at what she tried to do, hiring Lord Miller to make Solo, that was a really interesting, gutsy, ballsy move. The directors that came off 21 and 22 Jump Street, the guys who made Into the Spider-Verse, they hadn't done that at the time, but they made Solo. That it didn't work out is not Kathleen Kennedy's fault. Sometimes people just don't work together. It was gutsy for her to try and hire them in the first place. But now people blame her for that. But she was doing something out of the box. She is not somebody who interferes with the filmmakers. So if it doesn't work out with their filmmakers, that's something she's not.
Yeah. Now, I have several criticisms with Kathleen Kennedy, and
Sure.
why I think it's good for her to move on once she gets to
Of
the end
course,
of her
of course,
tenure.
because she, no, I don't
she's
think.
also done, hey, credit where it's due. She's done some good things. She's scored some big wins.
She's not a big Star Wars fan in general, just in real life. I don't think she's a big fan, and that's fine. So she'll go on and do other things. But I do think that Lucasfilm's in a pretty good place right now.
Now, as far as the question, the person who wrote it is asking, when are we going to start to see the results? Well, it's the same thing like we said under any big leadership change, like James Gunn and Peter Safran taking over DC Films. You're not going to feel the effects immediately. Like, as far as from a viewership point of view, what you're going to see is that you're going to see some org structure changes. Like, I think one of the things Bob Chapek will do within the first 4 months is get rid of a lot of those middle management. Bob Iger, sorry.
Yeah.
One of the first things you're going to see Bob Iger do is eliminate a lot of those middle management levels that Chapek put into place. I think the next guy who's really in trouble, I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, who is kind of became his Chapek's main lieutenant, the guy who came from the banking background, who kind of had all the power in the world. I think his job is the next one to go. I think you're going to see a lot of those behind the scene things that will then set up what we feel differently down the line. But it's going to be a while before we see the effects of it. But it's a move they had to make. And listen, I'm not going to lie. I love this news. I love it. I have not been a fan of the way Chapek has run this company. I'm not going to lie to you. I have not been a big fan of Disney the last couple of years as a company. I've liked a lot of their content that they put out, but I'm not a big fan of the company, and I haven't been a big fan of the company for the last couple of years.
Big question is, with this news, you going to go back to Disneyland?
Fuck no. No, I need to. No. I will never darken the door at Disneyland again, unless they make some pretty big fundamental changes. I don't know. Maybe big Papa Iger will come in and make some of those changes. But as of right now, no. My wife is going to Disneyland twice in the next week. Once with our friend Martika, and once with our friend Tommy. She's going to Disneyland twice this week. She's like, "Come on, you sure you don't want to go?" I'm like, "Baby, I love you, and if you want to go to Disneyland, I want you to have all the fun in the world. But I will never go back to that place again." Anyway, there's a whole story behind that. At any rate, this is huge. And I love the fact that Bob Iger's come back. Again, you never celebrate the fact that somebody's lost their job, but Bob Chapek losing this job is not like you or I losing our jobs. He's got tons more money coming from Disney. He's going to get a sweet parachute deal. Hey, listen, he gets to say in his career, he ran the best entertainment company in the world at Disney, all that kind of stuff. And listen, again, I never want to lose fact. As much as I trash the job that he did, I want us never to lose the fact that this guy stepped in an impossible situation. I may not have approved of the job that he did, but could a lot of people have stepped in and done a great job given the circumstances? I'm not sure they could have. So I want to give Bob Chapek some credit there. It was a very difficult situation, but they had to get rid of him, and I'm glad they did.
And he did work his way up. I mean, he was at Disney for decades.
Yeah.
You know, you don't stay at Disney if you're an incompetent boob. And he did a lot of work that people really respected, and I think that he'll find another job in corporate America. How many people have the experience of being at a company like Disney at the level he was at for as long as he was at?
If you're Bob Chapek, why would you want to work another day of your life?
I wouldn't.
Do you know how much money this dude's going to have in his bank accounts
Yeah,
now?
I know.
There's just a drive to lead. I've often thought about that too.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you made it. Go enjoy life. But they have this drive to lead.
Yeah, or maybe he'll take his money and start up something new, and that's his. But also, I want to point out something else. Again, absolutely no evidence. There's absolutely no evidence that Kevin Feige had something to do with this.
No.
Even though I've heard some things. But there's no evidence that he did. But if he did, just theoretically speaking, hypothetically speaking, if he did, listen, what do they call Jaime again in Game of Thrones? The Kingslayer?
Right.
Kevin Feige's a Kingslayer because he got rid of Ike Perlmutter. Ike Perlmutter was his boss at Disney for a lot of years. And as soon as he said something to Bob Iger and Alan Horn, the uppity up, saying, "I can't work under that guy anymore. No problem, Kevin, then that guy's gone." And he's gone. And I'm just saying and again, this is purely unfounded speculation based on something that I heard that I'm not even sure I believe. But I have very little doubt that on top of all those things that we already went, that huge laundry list of stuff that we already went through, if Kevin Feige then went to the board with a couple of the other studio heads and said to board members, "We can't work under this guy anymore," what do you think the Disney board's going to do?
Well,
They're going to say, "Okay, then Chapek's that's completely baseless, pure speculation."
But Feige, if you just look at the box office numbers of those films that are now a cornerstone of Disney's streaming empire, and also their entire merchandising, they're building the parks around Marvel characters. Kevin Feige is literally responsible for $30 billion worth of revenue coming in just on the movies that he's making. I mean, can you imagine if he keeps going with Marvel for however long, for another 20 years, that could be 50 billion or even 100 billion. One dude, and Victoria Alonso and Louis D'Esposito, this is big money. Executives do not trump people that can bring in this many billions of dollars into a company through their creative endeavors.
I mean, it makes him a very big power player there, even though he is lower on the totem pole. But I mean, again, the moment Chapek started taking away Feige's power, that's when I said to you, I said, this is not going to go over well.
Also, if the ability for him to do his job, to bring in that money into the studio, that probably carried a lot of weight. between Pixar, Marvel, and whatever, maybe another executive, maybe even Kathleen Kennedy was part of that.
And I wouldn't doubt it. Again, an Iger ally. And the most important thing here, I think, is that, I mean, Bob Iger is now the Michael Corleone of Disney. Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. And it's true. And one other big thing to note, he's not the chairman of the board this time. When Bob Iger was running Disney, he was supreme, untouched power. He was both the chairman of the board and CEO. Disney right now has another chairman of the board. So Bob Iger will be working with a board that he does not run, but I think they're going to give him all the power and all the leeway that he's going to want to try to set things back on the right path.
And what I read right before the show started, the Disney stock price was up 8%.
Right. Now, I expect that to settle again because the stock market does not like instability. And
No,
this
of
is a
course.
sign of instability, but hopefully things are changing. Anyway, guys, we could talk about this for another hour. And I'm sure as we get into your live questions, there's going to be more to talk about this Bob Chapek, Bob Iger situation. But we'll get to those in a second. For now, what do you guys think about this? This is a day that will be long remembered. Bob Chapek is out. Big Papa Iger returns. Bob Iger is back in charge for at least the next couple of years to reset the direction of Disney and to get in and groom an actual successor to carry on that vision, not to come in and trash it and replace it with something far inferior. How do you guys feel about this? What parts of this story stand out the most to you? Whatever your thoughts are, jump into the comment section below and leave those thoughts there.